Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by my friend Trey Lyle, fellow Virginia Tech class of 2019 graduate. He's currently a producer at CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg. He's also the co-host of the baseball podcast Foul Ball Area, and he is a big Eagles fan, which means it's perfect to bring him in for this NFL playoffs preview podcast. Trey, thanks so much for joining me. It seems like just a few months ago you joined me for the World Series.
I know it's I guess you got to bring in the big guns for championship season. No, I kid, of course. But Billy, it's always good to see your face. Always good to catch up with you and chat. And I think this is shaping up to be a pretty interesting postseason. I think it's a three-team race in the AFC, and I could see maybe a couple teams getting there in the NFC. So I think this is going to be a very interesting postseason. We got to have a neutral site AFC championship game. So who knows what can happen.
Well, that's right. Well, let's get right to it then, Trey. The NFL regular season is officially over. The playoffs are finally upon us. Super Wild Card Weekend is what they're calling it for the second straight year. We've got games on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night. So very excited. That's, of course, with the this is the second year, of course, that we've expanded to a seventh team in each conference for the playoffs. But before we get to the playoffs, looking back at the regular season, Trey, what are some of the biggest storylines, if there is one that stands out to you? I mean, I think of so many. Obviously, we had teams that excelled expectations, overperformed. We had teams that really disappointed. I think we have some really solid coach of the year candidates. I mean, you can look at 4 or 5 coaches where you're like, man, they really have a credible case to be coach of the year. We saw some of the same teams that we thought were going to be dominant before the season. They're at the top of their conference going into the playoffs. I mean, so many great storylines. I said it generically, but is there one or two specific storylines that you really look back on and you are shocked that happened this season?
I know this is going to be really biased, but it's the emergence of Jalen Hurts as a franchise quarterback, because that was the question coming into this season. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan and as an Eagles fan, you sat there, you're coming into the next season, you have a deep quarterback class, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, we'll say Will Levis. I don't believe that much into him. Hendon Hooker, Anthony Richardson to a degree. There's a deep quarterback class, and this is the year to prove it. The Eagles bring in A.J. Brown. They have a loaded roster. They have a really good offensive line. And he, missed 2 games, won the most games in the league this year. If you want to talk about quarterback wins is the thing. He was 14-1 and was an MVP candidate till he got hurt and missed 2 games. And I still say is an MVP candidate and had an all-pro caliber year. So I'd say the emergence of Jalen Hurts as, the franchise quarterback and really kind of doing that same trajectory he did in college where every year he got better and better and better. And he's proved that once again in Philadelphia. And if you look at Philadelphia as a whole, this is their second 1 seed in 5 years. And they've oddly enough done it with 2 different coaches and 2 different quarterbacks, which is kind of weird to see. So the model in Philadelphia, kind of just how they were able to flip a roster that looked so depleted just 2 years ago when they had the Carson Wentz issue and they moved on from him, and able to flip the roster so quickly and become one of the best rosters in football and get the 1 seed in the NFC. I think the disappointment in Denver, I'm starting to think it was more Nathaniel Hackett than Russell Wilson. It was the Broncos making a play for Aaron Rodgers. It didn't work out, and Nathaniel Hackett was clearly over his feet, and it just seemed like Russ didn't fit into that system. He played well down, the last 2 games of the season when he was fired, and we'll see what happens there. But the situation in Denver where it's kind of the opposite, the opposite thing happened compared to Philadelphia where you had a quarterback emerge and you're going to pay him. Well, now Broncos committed a lot of money to a quarterback that is great or was great and now has the weird questions that we've never associated with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the Broncos. I'll go to the flip side of that, though. How about the Seahawks? I mean, we thought that they were going to be a distant 4th in that division with the Rams and the Niners and the Cardinals. They end up making the playoffs at 9-8. Geno Smith, I'm so happy for him. He's, in my opinion, the front runner for comeback player of the year. He earned a lot of incentives in his contract for making the playoffs. Pete Carroll looks like a genius for moving off of Russell Wilson. You had the emergence of Kenneth Walker the second. You've still got those great receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So I'm happy for the Seahawks that they were able to have a above 500 season, make the playoffs. And like I mentioned, I mean, all the good coach of the year candidates. I mean, you had Nick Sirianni, of course, you know him well with the Eagles, the 11-0 start they had. They're the number one seed in the NFC. You've got Kyle Shanahan coaching 3 different quarterbacks to get the Niners to the 2 seed. He's showing why, in my opinion, he's a top 5 coach in the game. You've got Doug Peterson, a guy you also know well, former Eagles Super Bowl champion coach. I mean, the Jags were 2-6 at one point in the season. They end up going on a winning streak, winning 5 in a row to win that division, the AFC South. Happy to see Doug Peterson back in the playoffs his first season back because he took a little bit of a gap after being let go by the Eagles. And I just mentioned Pete Carroll and then Brian Daboll. I mean, the job he did with the Giants to get them to the playoffs. They were a team that a lot of people did not expect to make it. So, in my opinion, a lot of good Coach of the Year candidates. You mentioned Denver. Is there another team that you would say is maybe the most disappointing of the season? Like, for me, I would say the Packers because the Broncos, we didn't expect them to be this bad. But, if they had missed the playoffs, I don't think anyone would have said anything because, at least on paper going into the season, that division, some people were saying was the best ever with all the quarterbacks in that division. I'd say the Packers because going in, I think a lot of people I thought the Vikings were going to win the division, but a lot of people were still saying, we got to give Aaron Rodgers the lead on that because we've got to see someone take it from him before we can say someone else is going to win the division. And quite frankly, I mean, the way they choked that last game in the Lions, there's questions about Aaron Rodgers' future. I think he's going to come back. I think he's just holding the Packers hostage so that they just have to think about it, whether or not he's coming back. But for me, I'd say the Packers, especially the way the season ended, to the Lions would be the most disappointing team. 4-8 at one point, won a couple to be back in the playoff contention, but ultimately missed it for really the first time I can remember with the healthy Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like his thumb affected him, but he did play in all those games, and I think that's a good pick. I would have said Tampa if they didn't make the playoffs. They haven't looked that great this year. They're coming into the postseason with a losing record, which is a first for Tom Brady, but we'll get to our picks in a second. I would not be shocked if they win their playoff game given their opponent, but I'll go with the Los Angeles Rams. Had the worst season for a defending Super Bowl champion, and I don't know if they were going to repeat this year, but you expect them to. They were the favorites in their division. They should have competed a lot better in their division. And it was the opposite. Like the F them picks philosophy works when you win. But if you have a few injuries, which basically happened to them, it turned your season sideways. You lose Matthew Stafford, you lose Cooper Kupp, your offense kind of fades, and defense had some injuries. So it ultimately cost them really, they had no shot whatsoever after, it felt like opening night to get blown out by the Bills, and that was it for them. And it so I'll go with the Los Angeles Rams as another team.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point there. Like you mentioned, they did not make the playoffs as the defending champions. So again, it's probably 19th or 20th straight year that, if I do the math right, that a team has not repeated. The last team to do it was the Brady Patriots in 03 and 04. So a great discussion there, recapping the season. Let's now finally get to the playoffs and put our money where our mouth is and make these picks. So I think what we'll do here, Trey, is we'll go through each matchup. We'll, of course, preview the matchup. We'll pick that matchup, and then, because as you know, in the NFL playoffs, with the seeding, the lowest seed ends up playing the higher seed. So I'm going to ask you to keep track of your matchups because we may end up having different ones as we move into the divisional round, and then from there, we'll go to the conference championship and, of course, the Super Bowl. And before we start, I did want to say in my preseason NFL podcast, I picked the Bucs over the Bills in the Super Bowl. So we'll see if I stick with that prediction here. But let's start in the
on the fast lane. I want to mention on the fast lane, I picked Bills over Eagles. So before the season started, that's the sports show I do every day, 5 to 6 on CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg. That's my cheap plug for the podcast.
All right, well, let's see if we stick to our picks. Well, first starting in the NFC, and the Seahawks and the Niners, of course, both these teams play in the NFC West. Trey, Niners coming in this game, the spread is -10 in favor of San Francisco. Again, you talk about the Niners on paper. They're one of the best teams in the NFL. They're on their 3rd quarterback of the season. Brock Purdy has been amazing in his time starting as the Niners quarterback after Jimmy G and Trey Lance went down. The Niners have won 10 straight games. They traded one of the best running backs in the game, CMC, earlier in the season. You've still got dynamic weapons like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle offensively on the receiving end. The Seahawks, we just talked about him. Geno Smith had a phenomenal comeback player of the year season. Pete Carroll's a coach of the year candidate, credible one in my opinion. They beat the Rams And then they got some help from the Lions beating the Packers to make the playoffs in the final week of the season. And of course, we talked about the emergence of Kenneth Walker as well as that receiving duo in Metcalf and Lockett. So, you look on paper, I think America's pretty set that the Niners will win this game. You look at the two matchups. The Niners won 27-7 in week 2. And then a couple weeks ago in week 15, they won 21-13 with Brock Purdy at quarterback. So it was closer when he was a starting quarterback. But you look at this matchup, what do you see from these two teams?
Yeah, it's gonna be it might be a quick game because they're gonna run the ball a lot. Both teams, that's what their foundations, their offense. Kenneth Walker and CMC obviously are two really good running backs. I think Seattle's gonna cover. I think this game is gonna be close. I think the 40, I really think the Class DMC is Philadelphia and San Francisco. Just to drop a big hint of what I think probably the NFC title game is going to be. So I'll take the 49ers here. I think Seattle is able to keep it close because this is a divisional opponent. This is their third time playing. I could see it simply as like a 17-10, 17-13 kind of game where it might feel like San Francisco is dominating the game, but Seattle is able to hang in there.
I agree with you. I'm going to the Niners, but I think the Seahawks will make it a tough game and probably cover. You look at the Niners, they've been so close the last couple of years, lost the Super Bowl to the Chiefs a couple years ago. We're a couple plays from making the Super Bowl again, losing to the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Kyle Shanahan, like I talked about, is a top 5 coach in the game. And I think the big question is, and I'm sure that you've thought about this as well, is can Brock Purdy step up in the playoffs? I mean, we know he's got a great team around him of great supporting players, but we know in these NFL playoffs, oftentimes the quarterback is the one that has to step up. We all love the story of Brock. He's mystery relevant from this year's draft. And obviously, you look at one of his first games, he destroyed the Bucs. So really that put him on the map in terms of the Niners. But I think that's going to be a question mark in terms of deeper in the playoffs. Can he be the guy that makes the plays on the road, especially if they do have to go to a place like Philly to make it to the Super Bowl? But I think for this game, the Niners do win this matchup. So we both agree in this first matchup that the Niners will beat the Seahawks, and but we do think the Seahawks will cover the -10. So let's now move on to the Giants and Vikings matchup. Trey, I think this is the matchup that a lot of people, I think the Vikings are on upset alert because the Vikings are only -3. I mean, again, you look at the job Brian Daboll has done with the Giants, one of the 3 teams that was able to make the playoffs out of the NFC East. We saw a resurgence out of Saquon Barkley. We saw Daniel Jones being able to be an effective game manager. Of course, defensively, they were also a solid team as well. Then you look at the Vikings. I mean, we all know the great offense. They have all those big names. They've got Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins had a nice season as quarterback, really showing that he's a very solid quarterback. Now, whether or not he can lead them deep in the playoffs is another question. Big trade acquisition with the divisional rival, getting TJ Hawkinson, 13-4. Their 4 losses were to teams in the playoffs or right on the cusp of the playoffs. The Eagles, the Cowboys, the Lions, and the Packers. Their one matchup, the Vikings did win 27-24 in Week 16, but that was on a 61-yard field goal as time expired by Greg Joseph. So what do you see between these two teams? You've got a very high-flying offense like the Vikings, but a lot of people, it seems like from the spread, think they could be upset.
Yeah, give me the Giants. I think they're going to win this game. The Vikings are not a good football. I don't think they're that good. They won 13 games. Congrats. They have a negative point differential. I mean, they're just really good at winning one-score games. I think the Giants should have won that game the last time these two teams played. And I think the Giants correct their mistakes. I think the secondary is struggled for Minnesota, and Daniel Jones has looked good enough. I'll just put it that way. I think Saquon Barkley, will have a big day. He's rested. And if I'm going to pick any upset here, which actually I'm about to pick another upset, quote unquote, I'm taking the Giants.
Wow. Yeah, I can't blame you for making that pick because, it seems like the Vikings really are an upset alert. I mean, we all know they had the greatest comeback in NFL history in terms of the largest point deficit, beating the Colts in the regular season. But let's also be real. I mean, that's on the Colts. When you're up 35, you should win that game. But I'm going to stick with the Vikings just because I think, in my opinion, the Giants' path to winning is pretty slim. I mean, if you're Daniel Jones, you got to make all the throws. You really got to rely on the run with Saquon Barkley. and play defensively, try to force turnovers against this dynamic Vikings offense. Whereas I think the Vikings, playing at home, they know the pressure that's on them. I think the fact that they got destroyed by the Packers 2 weeks ago kind of helped them reset a little bit. So I don't blame you for taking the Giants, because it seems like America thinks the Vikings are going to get upset. But one thing I will say about the Giants, they got swept by the Cowboys and Eagles in their division, and both teams are in the playoffs. So I think a lot of their success was based out of the division, because they also only tied with the Commander, or they were 1-0-1. They ended up tying one of the games with the Commanders. So I think the Giants are maybe not as good as they seem. The Vikings are kind of coming in, maybe not on the hottest note, but I think they're able to get it done against the Giants. So I'm picking the Vikings in this matchup. Trey is picking the Giants. Let's now move on to the Monday night game. This might be the game of the weekend because of some of the other injuries that have happened in some of the other games. But the Cowboys and the Bucks. I mean, talk about the Cowboys, America's team, one of the most storied franchises, playing the greatest quarterback of all time, and Tom Brady. These two teams played in week 1 of the season. We all remember that game. The Bucks won 19-3, but we didn't know what the season was going to hold for both teams. I mean, the Bucks ended up really just kind of falling off the map. Barely made the playoffs, I think, and you would probably agree, because they played in the worst division in the NFL. But Brady looked like maybe people were calling for him to retire. I mean, he's 45 years old, went through a divorce with his wife Giselle. And you look at the Cowboys, Dak Prescott gets injured that game. People think the season's over, but Cooper Rush is able to lead him to a 4-2 record in Dak's absence. You got guys like Micah Parsons emerging. He's one of the candidates for Defensive Player of the Year. People think there's a lot of pressure on Mike McCarthy to win this game. Otherwise, he might be fired. So, I mean, really just a great matchup on both sides. A great storylines going into this game. What do you think about this matchup? I think the NFL put this on Monday night for a reason.
Yeah, it's because it's Dallas Cowboys, but it's quite simple. Dallas chokes in the playoffs. Mike McCarthy's getting fired. And we have Tom Brady at home in the postseason. He's undefeated. He's 7-0 against the Cowboys. They've already beaten the Cowboys, and I would argue Tampa was better when they played, and I think the turnovers are going to be a big issue for Dallas. They just got their brakes beat off in a must-win game against the Commanders, who were starting Sam Howell at quarterback, who came off a week where their coach said he didn't know the team was eliminated from the postseason. So give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I don't know why the Cowboys are favored in this game. So, yeah, I mean, come on. Let's be real here.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention the spread. The Cowboys are right now -2.5. I'm going with the Bucks. I agree with you. First of all the pressure is on the Cowboys to win this game. I mean, Tom Brady's the greatest of all time. He's won 7 Super Bowl rings. There's literally nothing he can do to take away from his legacy. We know he's already great. I mean, just the fact he's even playing at this age shows you how good he is. But I think all the guys will play relaxed. You think about guys like Leonard Fournette and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They call him Playoff Lenny for a reason. I think Fournette's going to step up. Mike Evans, I think, is going to have a big game. And I think the Bucks get it done at home. The Cowboys, like you mentioned, Mike McCarthy, he doesn't win this game. I think it's very likely he's going to be let go in his 3rd season as the Cowboys head coach. And, you got to give the Cowboys some credit. I mean, some guys like CeeDee Lamb have stepped up, and Tony Pollard had a nice season. I mean, he might be running back 1 with the way Zeke is kind of decreasing in terms of value. But I agree with you. I am going with the Tampa Bay Bucks to beat the Cowboys. So there you go. We actually agree on 2 of the 3 games. Both Trey and I agree that the Bucks will beat the Cowboys and the Niners will beat the Seahawks. But Trey is going with the Giants, and I am going with the Vikings. So keep a hold of your NFC divisional picks. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's now move on to the AFC, starting with the Chargers and Jags. So the Chargers actually come into this game, even though they're the road team, they're favored by -2. Matchup of 2 dynamic quarterbacks in Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. So we're all excited to see this matchup. Trey, what are you looking forward to in this game?
I like this matchup a lot. I think this is the most interesting game in the postseason. You have I think quarterback matchup's great. Justin Herbert versus Trevor Lawrence. I think both teams have played their best football down the stretch. I mean, Jacksonville's looked really good. I know that Tennessee game was weird, but I just think that's Tennessee, how they're playing. But they got the win. The game's in Duval. I just had to do that. I am going with my guy, the man who has won a Super Bowl, who I think is the most underrated coach in football, and is going to run circles around Brandon Staley. Give me Doug Peterson and the Jacksonville Jaguars to win this game. I think their pass rush can get there. Their defense has looked really good of late, and I think Trevor Lawrence can make enough plays to win this game. And I also could see a Mike McCarthy scenario where he gets fired because he's one and done in the playoffs with Brandon Staley, but I don't think that will happen.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Payton is one of the biggest free agent potential hires on the market right now, and it's been reported that he wants to stay in LA. So definitely the Chargers, if they don't win this game or even go deep in the postseason, may certainly consider firing Brandon Staley and hiring Sean Payton. But yeah, I mean, you look at this matchup on paper, it looks like the Jaguars are coming in kind of on a hot streak. You know, like I mentioned earlier, they started 2-6, ended up winning the last 5 games, finished 9-8. Beat the Titans to get into the playoffs. You know, you look at Doug Peterson, he's a great coach of the year candidate. Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne really stepped up. Christian Kirk, I think he lived up to his contract, and people were talking about all the money he got paid in the offseason, but he had 10 touchdowns this year, so he was a reliable target for Trevor Lawrence. And you look at the Chargers, and I wanted to ask you this question because I thought maybe one of the dumbest coaching moves I've seen in a while is Brandon Staley last week playing his guys, his starters, in that meaningless game against the Broncos, especially when the Ravens lost, which was before this game was started, the Chargers game. He already knew
We're
going
locked in the
game,
5.
they were the 5 seed. Yeah. So
And
what do you think
that
about that? I think
affected,
was a bad move. Yep.
yeah, Mike Williams and Joey Bosa can't play. That's huge. And it comes from that game. So, I mean, I get his logic behind it, but you really could have played them like 2 or 3 series and then pulled them. So, like treat it like a preseason game. Like, keep them in rhythm because they're playing well. Like I mentioned, they're both playing well down the stretch, and you don't want to lose that momentum. So there's a way to do it without kind of doing it full, and it's either you play super conservatively, kind of like what Philadelphia did against the Giants, where they told Jalen Hurts, like, if it's not there, throw it away, do not run, and we'll win this game, and they did, or and they had to win that game, or you basically like play 2 series, you get your offense, you score, which they did, and then you pull it. And it's also not like they were playing a bad defense. Like the Broncos have a elite defense. And so yeah, I didn't understand it at the time, especially once the injuries happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I'm going with the Chargers. I know it's not a great pick, and I don't feel great about it, but I'm banking on Mike Williams hopefully playing, even if he is banged up. And they talk about great receiving duos. I mean, you got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. You've got Austin Eckler out of the backfield, who you can dink and dunk to with Justin Herbert at quarterback. I'm really looking forward to seeing Justin Herbert potentially taking a big step. I mean, I feel like he's always kind of mentioning with all these great young quarterbacks like a Pat Mahomes, like a Josh Allen, like a Joe Burrow. When I mean, look, this is his first time in the playoffs, and so if he wants to be mentioned in the class with those guys, he's got to start having playoff success. So I think it will start this weekend. I am going with the Chargers. So there you go. We disagree on this first matchup. Trey is going with the Jags. I'm going with the Chargers. Let's now move on to
I don't think we'll disagree on the next 2.
yeah, I mean, you look at, Dolphins, Bills. Obviously, the big news today is that Tua has been ruled out. Teddy Bridgewater, as far as I know, has not been officially ruled out, but the Dolphins are preparing for Skylar Thompson to start this game. The Bills are -13 for a reason. Trey, I don't know what else to say about this other than this is why I did not want the Dolphins to make the playoffs. I would have preferred the Steelers or the Patriots because, the Tua factor was such a big question mark. But what do you think about this game? I'd be shocked if we were both not.
It didn't matter what team of those 3 were in this game. They're going to get blown out by Buffalo. So give me the Bills, give me all those points. I am I think this Bills team is I like I mentioned at the top, I think it's a 3-team race in the AFC. And I'm gonna take the Buffalo Bills because no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, I think, whether it was the Steelers or the Patriots, they obviously still would have lost to the Bills, but I think they were kind of coming in with more momentum. You've got two Hall of Fame coaches in Bill Belichick and Mike Tomlin. I mean, it would have been more competitive. I mean, this kind of has the feeling of, like, no disrespect to TCU, but this kind of has a feeling of a Georgia TCU type of matchup. I mean, there's nothing much else to say here. I'm going with the Bills. Obviously, you got to give credit to
I
the
don't think it'll be 65-7, but yeah,
yeah,
you're right.
you're right. But I mean, I think in my opinion, the Dolphins have the best receiving duo in the NFL in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But I agree with you. I mean, no two. You got to have a guy
AJ
to
Brown,
throw to.
Devontae Smith.
I
Pretty
think
good one.
good one, but I'll go with Miami. But you got to have a quarterback to throw the ball to those guys. And yeah, there's not much else to say about this one. Kind of takes the damper out of this weekend a little bit, but hopefully for Tua's, in all seriousness, for Tua's health long term, he can recover and hopefully, continue to play in the NFL. But we are obviously both going with the Bills, and of course, I have a feeling. Hopefully, I'm not forced giving away too much here, but the Damar Hamlin situation will kind of be a rallying cry for the Bills this
He
year.
got discharged from the hospital today. And we talked about the headlines. That is the best news of the season. The Damar Hamlin recovery and the fact that he is, as we speak, in his home is amazing. Like in his home in Buffalo, just gonna sleep in his own bed tonight. Like that is the best NFL story of the season, and it's not close.
Yeah, and you certainly look at the dominance of the Bills this year. I mean, they only had 3 losses, one to the Dolphins by 3 earlier in the season, the Vikings by 3 in overtime, and that they might not have even
They
lost
shouldn't have
that
lost
game.
that game.
Yeah, if Allen doesn't fumble at like the 1 yard line, and then they lost to the Jets by 3. These two teams played earlier in the season, but of course, and actually split both games. The Bills won by 3, but important caveat: both games featured Tua as the Dolphins starting quarterback. So not much else to say there. We are both going with the Bills. And the other matchup in the AFC, which is not that exciting, it appears it's going to be with the Ravens and Bengals, another divisional round matchup. We've got 3 of those in this first weekend of the NFL playoffs. The Bengals, I'm surprised, are only -8. I think it's because Lamar Jackson hasn't officially been ruled out yet, but we all saw Adam Schefter's tweet that he did not practice today. That's like his 11th or 12th straight practice he's missed. He hasn't played in 6 games anyway. And it's looking like he's not going to be able to play. Tyler Huntley may not play either, their regular backup quarterback. So the Baltimore Ravens may be going into a playoff game in Cincinnati with Anthony Brown, their third stringer, as starting quarterback. It's certainly not favorable for them.
And we just saw that game.
Yeah, that's right. We saw that last week. We all know with the Bengals, I mean, they're the defending Super Bowl runner-up, so they're going to be highly motivated this time around. But Trey, I guess, do you see any chance for the Ravens to beat the Bengals, or you think this is going to be similar to Dolphins Bills?
So if Lamar was playing, I'd might have picked the Ravens because once they added Roquan Smith, the Ravens defense is nasty. It's really good. They've played really good. They've played championship football on the defensive end the back half of this season. It's just they haven't had it offensively. And the Ravens are in a box, and it could be coaching. It could be just the fact they have the most unique, talented quarterback in Lamar Jackson, where you can't have a traditional backup. You got to have a Tyler Huntley, an Anthony Brown, an RG3, and that might not be a good enough backup compared to a Gardner Minshew, compared to a Cooper Rush, compared to a Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is a little less than that, but you get my point. So I'm gonna take the Bengals here. I think they're able to win comfortably. I think the Ravens defense could keep them close for a half, kind of like what we saw in that Week 18 matchup. But the Bengals offense is just too good, and I just don't think the Ravens offense will be able to keep up.
Yeah, the Ravens did beat the Bengals early in the season, but that, of course, was with Lamar Jackson. So you don't think Lamar is going to play? Is your prediction?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play. Based on, I think he hasn't been ruled out. So my guess, it looks that way. I might get a little cheeky here with a bold prediction, but I wouldn't be shocked if we've already seen Lamar Jackson's last game as a Baltimore Raven.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with his contract situation, and I'm not saying he's not hurt, but I think that's got to factor into of like, look, you guys didn't pay me, and all of a sudden you want me to come back for the playoffs. And
yeah,
speaking of Roquan Smith, they just signed him to a $100 million
$100 million.
when he's barely been on the team, and Lamar Jackson has, obviously been the face of this franchise. I agree with you. I mean, he's my favorite player, so to see him miss 5 straight games for a second consecutive season is tough to see. But yeah, without him, the Ravens have no shot. And honestly, even if they had him, I mean, you got to give him a puncher chance, but they'd still go in as the underdog because this man hasn't played in a month and a half. I mean, there's no guarantee he's going to be the Lamar Jackson that we know and love. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, with these last 2 games in the AFC, I don't think there's going to be much of a storyline behind them. I think the Bengals are going to win comfortably, just like the Bills are. So there you go. Those are all of the predictions we have in this wild card round. I think we only disagreed on 2 games. I had the Vikings instead of the Giants for Trey, and I had the Chargers instead of Trey. You had the Jags. So let's go back to the NFC. Of course, like I talked about with the NFL playoffs, with the seedings, the lowest remaining seed will play the highest remaining seed in the divisional round. And so that's why we kind of each have to keep track of our own matchups here, because we may have different matchups. So Trey, give me the 2 matchups you have in the NFC divisional round, and who do you have ultimately advancing the conference championship?
So I have San Fran versus Tampa, and I have the 49ers eliminating, Tom Brady gets eliminated by his childhood team, the San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy is the man who eliminates Tom Brady from the playoffs. So it would be Nick Foles, Brock Purdy, Joe Flacco, all men who have eliminated Tom Brady from the postseason. And Philadelphia has, when the Eagles were at full strength, and I think this will be, Jalen Hurts was definitely not 100% in that game. Last game they played the Giants, but I think this will be Jalen Hurts fully unleashed. Let's say he's like 85%. The last time they played an 85, the full Eagles versus the full Giants, the Eagles blew out the Giants. I think Eagles beat the Giants pretty easily. So I have the Eagles, San Francisco in the conference championship game.
So my divisional matchups are the 49ers and the Vikings, and the Bucks versus the Eagles. I'm going with the 49ers over the Vikings. I think the Vikings will not have a match for the total team effort of the Niners, who have one of the top 5 defense. I think Brock Purdy is going to play with a little bit less stress because he'll have won that first playoff game. So I'm going with San Francisco to beat the Vikings for the second time in a couple of years. I know they matched up a few years ago. So San Francisco is going back to the NFC Championship game. I have the Bucks and the Eagles, and I'm sorry, I know you're going to hate this. I am going with the Bucks to upset the Eagles. They played
some money on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a better Bucks team.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I mean, it's the Bucks may not beat the Cowboys, so I know I'm banking on a lot from Tom Brady, but he is the GOAT for a reason. I mean, he knows how.
They're an 8-9 Billy. They're an 8-9 football team. Like, it's Tom Brady. I get it, and that's why I pick him to get this far. But they're also an 8-9 football team. They can't run the ball.
I mean, but I guess, and this is kind of my question to you. I mean, what are some of the biggest concerns you may have about the Eagles? I know we didn't talk about them specifically because
it's Jalen Hurts' health. It's at the end of the day, it's Jalen Hurts' health. If he did not look healthy against the Giants, and I think part of it was they were holding him back. They have to unleash him. He's whatever percent. I think, and the health of Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson will come back at right tackle, who's the best right tackle in football. You won't be 100%. I think Philadelphia can dominate. If let's say they play Tampa or they play whoever, Philadelphia's gonna be able to dominate teams at the line of scrimmage. That's why they've won the games, and they have a really good pass rush. And this game is at the Link, which is the best home field advantage, I think, in football. So it's gonna be interesting. I think Philadelphia, because they have a guy, Javon Hargrave, who's their offensive tackle from the inside, has 11 sacks. They have 4 guys with 10 plus sacks. They have 70 sacks as a team. So it would be an interesting matchup against Tampa. But I can't believe you're picking an 8-9 team to beat a 14-3 team.
Well, I mean, we've seen, similar upsets in the. I mean, remember when the beast mode earthquake happened a few years ago with the Seahawks?
Yeah, but that was not the number 1 seed.
Well, but I will say this about the Bucks. I mean, I think they've played in a lot of, essentially win or go home. They have to play in a lot of couple close games at the end of the season to really be able to win the division. I mean, look at the Eagles. I mean, I know that the Eagles had to win the game last week to make the playoffs. But let's be honest. I mean, have the Eagles really played with a lot of pressure, especially last stretch of the season? I mean, once the Giants were resting their starters, I mean, I think everyone pretty much acknowledged, all right, the Eagles are going to win, barring something crazy happening. But I think the Bucs have just been kind of ready to be in the playoffs. They've kind of already been playing playoff games, I guess is the best way to put it, the last stretch of the season. So, again, it's saying a lot. I mean, again, Bucs might not even make it past Monday night, but I am going with Tampa to upset Philly in the NFC divisional round. So I have the Bucs and the 49ers making the NFC championship, which was actually my prediction before the season started. And Trey has the 49ers and the Eagles. So we'll come back to that here in a second.
You are a wild man, Billy Parvatam.
They call me Hot Take Billy for a reason, but
no, you know what? I missed this. I have missed that. You text me some of them sometimes, but every day in class, I miss that. I do miss that.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Bill Roth, all those great sports media classes we took with him. So the AFC divisional round matchup, hypothetically, Trey, what are your two matchups and who are the two teams you have advancing to the AFC championship game?
As much as I like Cincinnati, I want some history. The AFC title game, and I don't know where. Let's have some fun. You know what, Jerry? You finally get your wish. You get a championship game at your home stadium. Because the AFC title game's in Jerry's world as the Buffalo Bills take on the Kansas City Chiefs. I think this year is shaped up to that matchup in the AFC title game. And I think we're going to get it. I think So I think Kansas City handles their business against Jacksonville. And then I think Buffalo beats Cincinnati.
I agree with you. We are on a collision course for Bills and Chiefs AFC championship game. I think, like I said, the Bills are playing with the DeMar Hamlin factor. I think that's going to be a great emotional rallying cry for them. And the Chiefs, in my hypothetical matchup, would play the Chargers, who they've already swept twice this season. I just think the coaching mismatch between Andy Reid and Brandon Staley in that hypothetical situation would be too much to overcome. You know, the Chiefs are motivated after the way they lost to the Bengals last year in the AFC Championship game. So I am going Bills and Chiefs. I agree with you there to meet for the top dog in the AFC. So going back to the NFC, Trey had Eagles and Vikings. Will you pick your Eagles?
Eagles and Niners. I have the Vikings losing the first round.
Eagles and Niners, sorry. But will you pick the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl?
Yes, I will. I think this team, this will be the best pass rush the 49ers. If this is the matchup, this will be the best pass rush they face. Eagles have two really good corners. They're going to play C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a really good slot corner. I think they can. So I think Kittle, the middle of the field, will be interesting for Philadelphia, which has kind of been the weakness of their defense. I think it will be a good game. I just think at this point I'm taking home field, and I'm taking the better quarterback. So give me Jalen Hurts. Give me I picked him in the beginning of the year, and this is the best my preseason prediction for a Super Bowl has ever looked, and I can't quit. I can't quit it now. So give me the Philadelphia Eagles, and I just dropped the big hint who I'm picking to win the Super Bowl or win the AFC Championship.
All right, so Trey, to no surprise, is going with his Eagles to advance over the 49ers. I had the Bucs and the Niners, and here we go again. I'm going with Tampa Bay to advance to the Super Bowl.
You're trying to do your Okay, I already know what you're doing now. You just want your preseason to be right. I got it.
I will say this though. I think if I read it correctly, Brock Purdy was the first guy ever to beat Tom Brady in his first NFL start. I don't think that's going to happen 2 times in a row. I think if the Bucs are able to get there, they're going to be. I think, like I said, I mean the Bucs. I'd say out of any team, the Bucs and Tom Brady have the least pressure to win because again, they already won a Super Bowl 2 years ago. Tom Brady's won 7. He doesn't have to prove anything to anyone else. They're going to be playing with house money every single round if they make it far enough. So I think the Niners will bend under the pressure. I am going with Tampa Bay to make it to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years. So out of the NFC, Trey's going with the Eagles. I am going with the Bucs.
You're going to have a team that is 8-9 in the Super Bowl.
I mean, it is a one and done playoff format.
Eight,
It's not like the best of
eight.
7
I
series.
understand, but they're 8-9, Billy.
They also have the greatest quarterback of all time in Tom Brady. So.
They just lost to the Atlanta Falcons,
I mean, they were.
and Tom Brady played half that game.
I mean, again, it's not. I'm not saying it's the conventional pick, but
I love you, man.
crazier things have happened. I think it's fair to say that. And so obviously, yeah, we'll see what happens there. In the AFC, we both had the Chiefs and the Bills. Of course, Trey, the Bills have lost to the Chiefs the last 2 years. We all remember last year how brutal that loss was. They were up 3 with 13 seconds left in the regulation. Chiefs are able to tie the game on a field goal and then won the coin toss and won in overtime. So who do you think wins? Will Chiefs win for a third straight year, or is the third time the charm for the Bills?
Here we go, Buffalo. I'm taking the Bills. I think this is a team of destiny, especially how that game against New England went in Week 18. So I think the Buffalo Bills win this AFC Championship game. The fact that this is not at Arrowhead, I hope they put this game on turf. I hope they don't put this in grass. They don't put it outside in the elements. Well, it should be on grass, not turf, but put it inside. Because that game will be a freaking track meet. And it'll be if you want to get anywhere near what the game was like last year, put it in the best environment possible. Put it either in Atlanta, put it in Dallas, put it in LA, put it in Vegas, like put it somewhere where it's inside, it's not gonna be cold, climate, like that's what I think they should do. Because at this point, you did the neutral site to make it entertainment purposes, I really think. And put it there and have a game. Because both fan bases will travel wherever this game goes. They've proven that already. So go somewhere where it's not gonna snow, and let's have an epic game. And I think Buffalo pulls it out.
I agree with you. I'm going with the Bills as well. Keep in mind, the Bills beat the Chiefs 27-24 in the regular season. Gabe Davis, it seems like, always has a big game against these guys. Like I talked about, I mean, I just think everything that's happened this year for the Bills, coming into the year, they were one of the, if not the preseason favorite to win it all. I think they live up to those expectations and make it back to the Super Bowl. So we both agree on one half of the Super Bowl. Trey has Bills and Eagles, probably a Super Bowl that a lot of people probably have. I have maybe less conventional one, Bills and Bucks. We both stick with our preseason predictions. So Trey, will you pick your Eagles to beat the Bills in a hypothetical Super Bowl matchup? Be honest with our audience.
I'm going with what I picked for the preseason, and this is where I hope I'm wrong. I get to this point and I'm wrong. I really think Buffalo is a team of destiny. When Naheem Hines returned that kick for a touchdown, I just thought this team, this is it. This is it. They're going to win it all. So give me the Buffalo Bills to win their first Super Bowl. I think it's going to be epic. Arizona might burn to the ground because of the fan bases that are there. But yeah, I think the Bills beat the Eagles. I think it's going to be an epic football game. And I think Buffalo wins their first Super Bowl in franchise history.
Be honest, though. I mean, what are the chances you would go to Arizona if the Eagles make the Super Bowl?
None, because I can't afford it.
You honest, son.
If I couldn't go to Minneapolis, well, granted, I was in college then, but no, I can't afford it. That is why.
Well, yeah,
granted, I might watch the Super Bowl. I might have to watch the Super Bowl in the same exact spot I watched the last Super Bowl.
That is true. Yeah,
it worked. That's what I've said. I am a little stitious, so.
So I had the Bills and the Buccaneers, and Trey, believe it or not, in my preseason pick, I had the Buccaneers beating the Bills, but I'm gonna flip my pick. I won't go crazy. I think the Bills will beat the Buccaneers. I agree with you. I think they're the team of destiny. The DeMar Hamlin situation. It's so great to see him, like you talked about, back home, discharged from the hospital. But I just think Josh Allen's a man on a mission. He wants to be in the same class as guys like Brady and Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, having won Super Bowls. I think this is the year Josh Allen gets it done, and I will pick the Buffalo Bills. So there you go. After all of those picks, after all of that conversation, both Trey and I agree that the Buffalo Bills will win this year's Super Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. Although, caveat, Trey's hoping his Eagles are able to prove him wrong and win it
Hope
instead.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, for sure. So there you go. That's great. I had a lot of fun there, Trey, picking our playoff predictions, making our picks for each game. I wanted to ask you, what is a team that might not win the Super Bowl that's in this playoffs, but they could make a deep run? Because it is a one and done format and anything can happen. Is there one team that
I'll say
stands out?
Even though I have them losing in the first round, it has to be the Chargers because of Herbert. I think if they play Kansas City, they can beat Kansas City. They've done it before, and it's a divisional game. So I'll say the Chargers because they have the talent. But so I would like that's the thing. Like if the Chargers beat the Jags, I think they may get to the AFC Championship game. But I trust Doug Peterson too much not to pick. Like I'm not going to pick against Doug Peterson in the playoffs. So, I've seen it too many times. That's why I went with Jacksonville originally. But I would be shocked with the Chargers.
I'm going to give you a shocker here. I'm going to go with the Cowboys, not because I
You
think
picked the Tampa Bay Bucks. You should have just said them.
well, that's true, but I think that I'm going with the Cowboys not because I think that on paper they're better than some of these other teams, but because if they can beat the Bucks, which I mean, again, they are favored and going into the game, I think that their road to at least the NFC Championship game is a little bit easier. I think, they may only have to play the Vikings or they may play the Niners. I just think the matchup wise, if they're able to win that first game, they potentially could make a deeper run. And look, I don't want the Cowboys to win, but I think it would be a heck of a story to see Jerry Jones kind of front and center, and all the circus and paparazzi that surrounds the Cowboys. So I'm going to go with Dallas just based on the matchups. But like I said, it is a one and done format, so anything can happen. And I'm curious, what do you think too? Is who's under the most pressure to win the Super Bowl? Whether it be a player, whether it be a coach. Is there one guy that stands out to you that you're like, man, you really feel like this guy's got to get it done this year?
So to win this weekend, I think it's Dallas. Because that's the expectation. You're the favorite. I think if you win, I think especially how they played last week against Washington, they lose that game. So I think for this week, as for winning it all, I'll say Josh Allen, just because Mahomes has won, Burrow has been there. And those are going to be the three guys. It appears going to be the three guys in the AFC, and it's Josh Allen's turn. It feels like so. I'll say Josh Allen.
I agree with you. You took the words right out of my mouth. Mahomes has won a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow's been there. Feels like for a guy like Josh Allen, who's received a lot of praise that he's deserved, it feels like he's got to, make a Super Bowl to really validate some of that praise. So, and again, the Bills have been, one of the 2-3 teams preseason that were favored to win the Super Bowl. So, I think for sure Josh Allen's kind of the guy that you really feel like needs to get it done this year to validate his legacy. And I'm curious too, Trey, on another note, I think what makes the NFL so great is on average 6 or 7 teams every year make the playoffs that did not make it the previous year. I mean, let me see if I can kind of remember them off the top of my head. I mean, you've got the Vikings didn't make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs this year. Make the playoffs last year. They're in the playoffs this year. The Giants made the playoffs this year. I think every team in the AFC except the Bills, Bengals, and Chiefs did not make the playoffs last year. So you're talking about the Dolphins as well as the Chargers and the Jags. And so give me one team that did not make the playoffs this year that you think has the pieces and will make the playoffs next year.
Think.
It's a good question. I mean, there are a lot of teams right on the cusp.
So I can go with the layup here and say the Green Bay Packers because I think the thumb injury did affect Rodgers, especially middle in the season. But I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions. They have a top 5 pick. So do they go quarterback or do they go like a Will Anderson, Jalen Carter? Like if they get a Will Anderson and pair him with Aiden Hutchinson, that could be incredible on a defense that struggled last year. They improved throughout the year. I really love Dan Campbell. So give me as the Pat McAfee show would say, the brand new Lions. and the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great pick. And again, you saw with how much heart they played against the Packers, knocking them out of the playoffs. The Packers, like you talked about, would be an easy pick, but I'm going to go with the team that you mentioned earlier, and that is Los Angeles Rams. Now, they have a lot of question marks whether or not Sean McVay returns, whether or not Aaron Donald returns, but assuming those guys come back and Cooper Kupp comes back healthy and Matt Stafford can come back healthier than he was last season, I think I like their chances to make it back to the playoffs. I mean, again, you look at that division. I mean, look, I would love to be wrong, but I think it's more likely the Seahawks season this year was a fluke and they kind of go back to a team that, is mediocre and doesn't make the playoffs. We all know that Cardinals situation is a mess. Kyler Murray doesn't seem like he's committed. They've talked about they're going to trade D-Hop now. So I think you look at their division, you look at the NFC, which I still believe is kind of the weaker conference of the two. I will go with the Rams to make it back to the playoffs next year after having missed the playoffs this year. I'm curious, who do you think is who do you think has an easier path to the Super Bowl if you look at the one seeds, you look at the Chiefs?
Oh, it's Philadelphia. It's Philadelphia. It has to be. You're not playing Joe Burrow or you're not gonna have to face Joe Burrow or Josh Allen in the AFC title game. Like, no, like you're gonna play what? Brock Purdy, Kirk Cousins, like.
And I agree with you on paper, but I'm curious. Do you think, and you may, obviously you're biased because you're an Eagles fan, but do you think the NFC is quote unquote more wide open? I mean, you really feel like in the AFC.
I agree with that. But the problem is, like, if you let's quote unquote power rank these teams, you probably have, like, you could probably go like Kansas City, Philadelphia, then you're going Bills, Bengals before you get to San Francisco, and it's still brought like. At the end of the day, in the NFC title game, and why I can't pick San Francisco is because there's going to be a situation where it's a 3rd and 8, 2 minutes left, down by 7, and you have to have it. Do you really believe Brock Purdy can make that play? Because I don't. I think Jalen Hurts can. I think Joe Burrow can. I think Josh Allen can. I think Pat Mahomes can. I think, but who in the NFC do you think can make that play? I think Jalen Hurts can. I know Tom Brady can. Can Dak? I don't know. Can Kirk Cousins? I don't know. Can Brock Purdy? I don't know. Can Geno Smith? I don't know. At the end of the day, it comes to quarterback. Whereas I think the teams in the NFC are probably closer in terms of like competitiveness. It's just at the end of the day, I'm still taking this quarterback. I'm still taking like Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback. The quarterback advantage is just bigger in the NFC between Philadelphia and the other teams outside of maybe Tampa and Dallas. And the way Dak's played late, I wouldn't even know about that.
I agree with you. I think that's the best way to put it. Aaron Rodgers, do you think he retires or think? I mean, look, he's going to make $60 million next season, so I think he's coming back.
He's a Packer. He's coming back. I think he's coming back.
And then what do you think is the Super Bowl window? Do you think he has another Super Bowl left in him?
No. Unless he changes teams.
And you just think with the, I mean, and to be honest, I think it's his fault that Devontae Adams left, but so you just think with the way the team is constructed right now, it would be pretty hard.
I think they're gonna be better next year. Watson and Dobbs proved to be pretty good, and I think their development's gonna be big. I think Christian Watson proved to be a really good wide receiver, and I think they'll improve. Their defense finally came together towards the end of the year. I think Aaron Rodgers' thumb clearly affected him because you never saw the amount of picks that Rodgers threw this year. So I'll say I could see that Packers being the 1 seed next year, but I just lean towards no. Him winning another one because it's so hard. It's just so hard.
And Trey, I wanted to ask you one question because you being an Eagles fan, you have seen a Super Bowl championship in recent memory in the last 5 years. We all remember that great game when Nick Foles led the.
Hey, we previewed that game back in the day. How about that?
Yeah, that's right. I still remember for Bill Roth's broadcast performance class. I want you to take me through what was it like watching that game. I mean, are you able to enjoy the game, or you really just kind of tense the whole time? Some of your memories.
I was a wreck the whole. I enjoyed moments of that game. I enjoyed the Philly special, and I sort of called that play. The Philly special. I yelled as Trey Burton was getting the ball, he was a quarterback in college. I just remember that. That moment popped in my head. Like he was a quarterback in college, and then you see the throw. But it was one of the few times in my adult life that I cried was after they won. And I know the joke was it that Monday in class. I think even Bill said, I was like, "You're really here, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, I am. I feel great, but a little tired, but I'm here."
Were even you I mean, I know the Eagles, were a good team, but were even you surprised by the way they won that game or the fact they won that
Nope.
game at all?
No, I knew. So, and you were with me. I said this all week. I said Philadelphia's going to win. I was so I've never been more confident about a game in my life, and I knew they were playing Tom Brady. I knew they were playing New England. I right as the NFC Championship game was happening, how they blew out, they blew out Minnesota. I knew they were going to win.
And I'm curious too, Trey, because as we close out this podcast, I wanted to close on this topic because this is a spirited topic I've had with other people that we went to college with, and that is NFL versus college.
Oh,
a lot of the and I think you remember being in the classroom for some of those debates, but a lot of the guys we went to school, and I think to be fair, it depends on where you grow up because I think for a lot of guys, if you didn't grow up near a city with a professional team, you may view the college team as your professional team, but in your opinion, which sport is better and why would you say that sport is better?
college football, and I
Wow.
don't think it's close. It's more entertaining because, and so I did a really a monologue when I was filling in for the Vaseline because you have the widest, like the day of the semifinals, you just see more shit, like the tomfoolery and craziness in the college game. The same day that we had two epic semifinals that were offensive shootouts, Iowa Kentucky played with an over under 31, and it was 21-0, and Iowa had 200 yards of offense. Like that doesn't happen in the NFL. It's more competitive, and you also don't get moments where Kansas comes back from 13 or 15 points down, and in the key moment of a 2-point conversion, the camera gets blocked by an Arkansas fan wearing a Arkansas mascot onesie. Like this is just from bowl season. I just think the passion, like the passion is more in the college game. The tradition is more in the college game. And you throw that all in and throw that all together, it's just a better product from an entertainment point of view. Because I could argue an NFL game broke out between Georgia and Ohio State in that semifinal because there was NFL talent all across the board. She also saw a what game in TCU, Michigan, where you had two pick sixes, you had deep play 55 points in the third quarter. Like it's just to me like the variety you get in those games and the craziness that can happen, you don't see in the NFL because it's a professional game and they're all professional players.
So let me ask you this question: do you think that more teams have a chance at winning the Super Bowl, or more teams have a chance at winning the College Bowl?
More teams have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Like if you want parity, it's the NFL. If you want craziness, it's college football. If you want tradition, if you want passion, like you're not going to see someone as like if you go to whatever college town in the South or like I don't think there's anyone as passionate about like there are very few fan bases like maybe Philadelphia, maybe Buffalo. That's really it. Maybe Kansas City that are like college like passion. But there's so many for like every team. Like you see it from like your big names, your Georgias, your Alabamas to a North Dakota State, a JMU, App State, Liberty even here. They're very passionate. It's kind of like, the passion for the team is so much deeper because you go to that school. You're like, it's part of you. Like you don't see that really in the pro game.
To be fair to you, I think you're actually making some you're not sounding as outrageous in your argument as maybe some of the other guys I've had this conversation with, but
it's because I'm smart.
I'd still go with the NFL. I mean, you mentioned it. You even agreed parity. the more teams have a chance to win the Super Bowl. I think entertainment-wise, it's great. I'm not as likely to see a MAC game, but I may see a game between the Texans.
Tuesday night action is the lifeblood of college football.
I think that's an interesting take. I mean, but, I'm more likely to watch Texans and Bears, for example, because I may have fantasy football players in that game. I mean, I think fantasy football has kind of brought in a new element of, you're going to follow teams that are not necessarily your teams. I agree with you. I think to go to a college game, to go to, watch Alabama and Tennessee in the regular season, that's, it's hard to beat that. But I just think from a parity standpoint, in terms of entertainment at the end of the year, there's no question I think the NFL is better. And I guess to go off in that vein, do you think the 12-team playoff will help with parity in terms of there'll be more teams that have a chance to win? Or do you think, it'll probably be 2 or 3 teams that win, but, more teams will be in the playoff?
Well, a more competitive semifinal and championship game because the most talented teams will rise to the top. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
All right. And my final question for you, Trey, to close out this podcast is, what do you think about the Hokies? I mean, Brent Pry, it seems like he's got the right charisma for the fan base. What do you think they have to do to at least kind of go back to competing for the Coastal if the divisions stay the way they are, or at least competing for the ACC?
Well, there's no more divisions, so rest in peace, our beautiful Coastal Division. It was glorious. But I think they're doing the right way. They're attacking the state of Virginia, which you want to see. They're using the transfer portal to flip the roster in the ways they needed to. Probably needed to do last offseason, but they wanted to get used to the ground. So I think they're using a strategy that can work here at Virginia Tech. It's an old school strategy. You recruit the state, you develop, and it should work out. So I'm hopeful for it. I think it's going to work out given how well he's recruited in this last class, in his first full class as head coach.
Trey, man, this has been such a pleasure getting to catch up with you and talking the NFL playoffs and so many other topics. Thanks so much for joining me, and good luck to your Eagles in the playoffs.
Thanks, man. It's always good to chat with you, my friend Billy, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much to my friend Trey Lyle, fellow Virginia Tech class of 2019 graduate, current CBS Sports Radio Lynchburg producer, co-host of Foul Ball Area, for joining me on the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. Enjoy the NFL playoffs, everybody. We'll see what happens on the field, and we'll see you next time on the podcast. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you later.